I think my first encounter with Ravel's music must have been through actually Zigan, because as a violinist, I remember vividly a piece that I was very interested in exploring. So as a violin student, that was way more difficult than I could handle. I remember, but I think Zigan must have been the first piece of Ravel that I really studied. Of course, like anybody else, I had been familiar and exposed to performances of Bolero and Daphnis, of course, but quite as a teenager playing the violin, I think Zigan was my first contact. The first piece by Ravel I conducted in concert, oof. It's a fabulous question. It's a I can't remember. It must be La Valse. It must be La Valse because, I'm talking with, beyond like the student days, because I'm sure I've been working on Ma Mère Loi a little earlier. But I think La Valse is possibly the first one I conducted in a performance with the BBC Philharmonic. It must be in 2008 or something like that. Ravel for me is like the embodiment of perfection, and I say that like I would say this of Mozart. I find he's a composer that, I'm not inventing this, but I think it's really how I feel about his music. It is not very innovative in a sense. It's music that embraces everything that was available at the time, when we talk about rhythm, harmony, and melody, and the way he condenses all of those things to utter perfection is really what represents the music of Ravel for me. As opposed to Debussy, Wagner or Schumann, for instance, who were really composers that created a completely new language, and sometimes not pushing it to perfection, but were real innovators. I think Ravel, quite the opposite, was someone I think whose music was embracing tradition but really pushing it to its perfection. It's true that through my connection and relationship with the Boston Symphony, I've been exposed to the music of Ravel quite frequently, not only as they were performing it live, but just walking into the library and being able to open the scores of Pierre Monteux, and actually not Monteux, but Munch scores were still very present in the Boston Symphony Library. It's music that orchestra had real tradition performing, and I don't think I really kind of benefited directly from what Monteux and Munch and Moore and brought to the Boston Symphony with this repertoire, but for sure my relationship with Seiji Ozawa was quite important for me to explore this music. I remember notably that as a fellow at Tanglewood in 2001, I was actually Seiji's assistant for a double bill of both opera productions. So he was conducting L'Heure Espagnole, and I was actually his assistant on that project. And Robert Spano, who taught at the Tanglewood Music Center, was conducting a performance of L'Enfant et les sortilèges, and I was also involved in somewhat as an assistant for both pieces. So that was my introduction to Ravel's operas, and so I think the presence at Tanglewood and also in Boston was very important for me to continue my exploration of this repertoire, but also through other connection. My working with Bernard Haitink was important because, of course, he would regularly conduct this repertoire as well, and brilliantly. So yes, there was a tradition there that I could embrace as a young man that was present in my environment. How to seek Ravel sound with international orchestra is an interesting one. I don't think I have recipe. If I could, it would be very easy. I think it's first of all to, as always, to really start with what the orchestra offers, because I don't think there's only one way to accomplish that sound. Of course, you have the cliche of, really for me, of technically always playing this with music with a lot of espressivo, with the left hand in the strings, for instance, with a very light bow, a very fast bow, sometimes a bow that actually is turned a little slightly so that you have this flautando effect. But it's always, for me, music that needs to sing a lot. I think at the essence is not so much about technique. I mean, once you engage with this, it's about understanding the writing of Ravel. For me, for instance, a crescendo in Ravel is not so much about building more volume, but it's really about an indication that the music needs to move forward. And the idea of rubato is something that is very important to me in this music. A short accelerando connected to a short crescendo, a little bit more of a taking time as the diminuendo happens in the sound. So it only works with really trying to capture movement, so that the music never really stops, that it really floats, but also having a little bit more of that notion of rubato. The portamenti, the glissandi that are just so specific to the way people played in the 20s, in the 30s. Try to imitate a little bit of that tradition is essential too. And layers. I think the French music works wonderfully if it's more than two things going on at once. That you can really hear all the dialogues between all the different instruments. Find the right sense of balance, because we know the timbre that he creates by putting two instruments together. If you think of what a bass clarinet doubled with a cor anglais produces, or a trumpet with a flute. I'm taking examples like this out of the blue, but those are very specific things that in which you can create, I think, a sound that is very Ravel and French like. And more, but I think that's essentially the idea of really trying to find the right pace for it. Yeah, I think Ravel's music is close to, I would say, to contemporary composers that have for focus the form. I think we know that Ravel's, it's essential quality is in thinking about the form of everything. And I think if you compare it to a composer like Pierre Boulez or actually Esa-Pekka Salonen is a very good example also, because I think the form in their developing a piece as composers is essential. And I think in that sense Ravel is still very close to that idea for me. I think I heard recently an interview with Manuel Rosenthal actually talking about Ravel's music, but also his relationship and the time he spent with him. And he emphasized, I remember, on that idea of form, first and foremost. Yes, we are recording, if not all Ravel, a lot of Ravel with the OBC, with the Barcelona Symphony at the time. At this time, for me, what motivated me beyond wanting to create this legacy for the orchestra and myself at this stage of my development as a musician was how much this music can help us achieve so much artistically. To grow artistically is one thing, but also to be able to offer the tools to listen to one another, to create this sense of intimacy in the sound, of dialogue constantly, of chamber music on a big scale when you think of Daphnis and Chloe, for instance. But the range of Ravel's orchestra music is so so great. You go from the intimacy of Pavane, Pour une enfant défunte, to the big apotheosis of the final dance of Daphnis. That journey is so tremendous that there is incredible resources and tools for an orchestra to grow by recording this music. It's not really unlike what I've done in Seattle when I arrived. I felt that the orchestra had many qualities, but we could go further into exploring a bigger range in sound, a bigger intimacy in sound, and I think I used in Seattle the music of Henri Dutilleux to achieve this. And I thought with Barcelona it could be interesting to do it with the music of Ravel, because of Ravel's, ties to the Basque Country, of course, through his mother, and this kind of precision to detail and perfection that I guess he inherited from his father, his Swiss father's, engineering qualities, and something that I hope I could bring to that orchestra. Maybe they'll give me the mother side of Ravel, and maybe I'll give them a little bit of the father figure side in terms of the relationship between discipline and spontaneity and poetry. So. Yeah, I mean, to do both operas as part of this project, recording project, was essential to me. It was, I must confess, it was a little bit of a selfish ambition, because I've been living with those operas now for more than 20 years, having very seldomly the opportunity to perform them indeed. And after having done them a few times, I just felt, this is time for me to kind of see what I can do in terms of really also casting those operas. And I think it's essential, because I think any great orchestra on this planet can play symphonic music and opera with the same quality and the same eloquence. And I thought really to be able to have the OBC to also be exposed to the opera repertoire would be really enhancing the experience and of course you can't really approach the music of Ravel without including those two masterpieces. So it was essential. I think it will inform what we do by performing the operas, will inform how we play the rest of his music, of course, and vice versa. Well, I'm very indebted and grateful for the Ravel edition, for the Ravel pieces that I've been able to record so far. This week we worked on the new edition of La Valse, which was like enlightening for me. I mean, I did record already La Valse with the Seattle Symphony years ago in the only edition that I knew so far, and to be able to observe all the work that has been done with this edition, in working with manuscript, and has been a really incredible experience for myself and the orchestra. I feel that the pieces are completely different from so many details. Some of things are just pure restoration of eliminating mistakes from the parts, but the ending alone, kind of makes complete sense in this new edition, where instead of yata-ti-ta-ta, you have this massive accento and taka-taka-tam. It's so much more exciting, so much more truthful, I believe, to what Ravel has intended. Little differences, like we were talking about, some melodies making their ways into the trumpet part instead of the flute, the low flute, which makes much more sense in being accompanied by the horns at that moment. So much material in the percussion that had been left out, that really kind of build that massive crescendo from Viennese beautiful homage to the waltz to the post-war music, really, that has so much violence. And this is enhanced and amplified by all those corrections. So, I mean, to come back to do another recording of La Valse for me made only sense if it's not just one, again, that I've done a few years ago with my previous orchestra in Seattle, but just to be able to embrace all those differences and see how those two recordings will compare. I'm very curious because of course my idea about the piece hasn't really changed. For me it's the same journey, the same story that I want to tell with it, somewhat of the same pacing, but just to be able to really be able to also share with the audience those differences and to be able to put your eyes on the manuscript of Ravel's is also spectacular because it's so beautifully written, the craft and the music itself. You can see the perfection of it just by looking at the score. The first thought I had about including music by Ravel orchestrated by other composers, and namely Kenneth Hesketh, was when I decided to record the Tombeau de Couperin. That was the first piece we actually put to the disc on the project, and of course there's those two added movements, the toccata and fugue in Tombeau de Couperin that had been orchestrated by Kenneth Hesketh, and I thought, knowing Kenneth, from a long time ago, studying in London and becoming really quite friendly with him, and really admiring his work, I must say, his orchestration work of not only Ravel, but the music of Dutilleux and Lily Boulanger and more. He has a flair for orchestrating French music. I thought it would be interesting to look at Suite auriculaire, where the music for two pianos, if I'm not mistaken, would really be enhanced by being translated into the orchestra. So I spoke with him about this project and you guys at the Ravel edition, and we agreed that it would be interesting to see what could come of, especially of Habanera, and that you find again in the Rhapsodie Espagnole. And I think Kenneth came with a wonderful and brilliant idea where all the music that you hear in the Rhapsodie Espagnole Habanera that is for the winds, you will now hear in the strings in the Suite auriculaire Habanera, and then the winds and the strings music into the winds, roughly, so that you will have the same piece imagining very, very different landscapes. I thought that was a fascinating project, and we will be premiering this very, very soon, and indeed recording it as part of the project. And there will be others, I think, other pieces that I might be curious in exploring what we can do, notably in the song repertoire, and see how we can maybe continue some of those initiatives.